Without further ado, I'm very excited to present our speaker today, Rich Matsuura, who is the Vice President of Product at Dispatch, where he heads up the product management and the user experience design teams. Dispatch.com is a web and mobile platform-based on-demand courier service for businesses currently in 50 markets. Rich is formerly the co-founder and VP of Product at Pandatree, a live tutoring language learning website for kids, where it is currently the highest rated learning site for children on Google reviews. Rich hired Pandatree's development and design team, creating a product strategy and roadmap, which successfully launched Pandatree's platform in less than 3 months. Rich is also a co-founder of Crowdera, a civic crowdfunding platform designed exclusively for educational and nonprofit organizations. And at Crowdera, Rich brought forward his deep knowledge and expertise in transforming business operations and launching new sustainable initiatives. Furthermore, Rich has also held multiple director positions at eBay, including Director of Global Seller Trust and Feedback, Director of Product Management, and Head of Shipping Business. At eBay, Rich and his team increased site-wide seller satisfaction and built the first mobile selling eBay app. He also fixed high shipping costs and implemented key programs for eBay's buyers and sellers. Just from that introduction alone, I know I'm very excited and honored to share Rich's journey and background in product management. And I also hope everyone is looking forward to his level of insight in searching for remote positions best suited for our talents. Without further ado, we thank you again, Rich, for your time. You may share your screen.
All right, so a little bit about me. I've been managing and hiring folks for a number of years recently. And one of the reasons why I wanted to pull this together was I've been hiring a lot of product managers and UX designers at Dispatch. We're remote first. So I've been hiring a lot of folks remotely. And I've been just going through a lot of interviews, a lot of resumes. I think I've been just trying to compile a lot of tips around how some mistakes I see and some things that I see people doing really well, kind of pulled those together here. The other point here is I went through a job search process myself. I'm actually fairly new to Dispatch. I've been working here since about June. And as I went through this process was a little bit different for me. So normally, I do have a pretty good network of folks. And normally when I would go through a job search, I would reach out to my network and usually I could find something there. But this time, when I was at Pandatree at the time, Pandatree was doing very well and still doing well. And I didn't want to give off the impression that we weren't doing well by reaching out to my network, especially as we're going through fundraising and such. And it felt like me looking for a job. I was there for 5 or 6 years. We were actually having one of our best years this past year. But a lot of the work I was doing there was very program management. It was things that different from when we first started and we're building our product. It was a lot of focusing on project management and not necessarily product management. So I really was looking for something else and worked through with my co-founder and we figured, product was doing very well at the time. So started looking for something and again, didn't want to give off the wrong signals that Pandatree wasn't doing well. So I went through a regular job process as if like not leveraging my network at all. So I was doing resumes, going through LinkedIn, shooting resumes out, and I learned a lot through that process. And some of that is what I wanted to share here as well. I'm also optimization obsessed. I don't know what the right word is here, but I'm kind of lazy about stuff. There's a lot of stuff I don't like to do, like writing resumes and editing resumes for different jobs. So I want to make this as easy as possible for me and as fast as possible for me. And I learned a lot as I was going through this process to make this just as easy as possible as I was going through that process. The other couple things, obsessed with barbecue. You'll see one of our barbecue inventions in the background there on our right-hand side. A couple of my friends here, we do barbecue competitions. We've done it for a while. We actually took second place was our best and it's been fun. We just cook a lot of barbecue. We actually did a startup around barbecue. 2 folks you see in the screen here, both UH grads, both working in Silicon Valley now. And I also like to play pool. So I got the 8 ball there, bottom left-hand corner. If anyone wants to play pool, completely serious about this. If anyone wants to play pool, shoot me a note. I'm at Velvet Touch on a regular basis, which is right up the street from the King Street in McCully. So pretty close to the university there. Anyway, let's go on to, I wanted to give a little advice about advice. So I was pulling this together. This is a grain of salt. And I just want to say, take all this stuff with a grain of salt. I'm not a recruiter. Like I don't go out and spend all my time hiring and looking for folks. This is just a lot of the learnings I've done or I've gotten going through this process. The couple of things about this is one of the things I was looking at when I was going through this process of looking for remote work, I was reading a site that said LinkedIn worst site. It's the worst site to find remote jobs. And as I went through the process personally, LinkedIn was the best site for me in terms of the type of jobs I was looking for. So when you're looking for and getting advice here, it's different by industry. I think some of these things I'm going to talk about are, I think they're going to be helpful across different industries. But again, try these yourself. Some of them I think are going to work great for you. Some of them maybe not so much. But as you're looking for advice and getting advice across different areas, just make sure that you're just thinking about, there's different opinions that are out there, including the ones that I bring here. The one thing around optimization, I wanted to just share my philosophy here as I was going through this job hunting. This really is a numbers game. And you send your resumes out, you hope that they get read, you get that phone screen, you go through the interviews, and then you hope to get an offer out of it. And what I wanted to do was expand this funnel and grow this funnel, so that you get more of your resumes read, you get more of those phone screens, more of those interviews. Not necessarily I didn't spend a lot of time sending out more resumes, but I was trying to optimize my resume, optimize my techniques, optimize my interview skills so that I had a better chance of getting to more offers at the end. And some of these tips, I'm going to try to talk to you about how to grow these funnels so you can increase your probability of getting your resume read, getting those phone screens, and getting through those interviews. Real quick, since this is about remote, so right now I'm working remote. Couple of things just to consider. I think everyone here probably knows this. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but time zones is a big deal. I mean, my first meetings usually start around 5 in the morning. So I'm up pretty early. There's a lot of video meetings. So in my current role, I'm averaging Google Calendar shows me how many hours of meetings I'm in per day. And it's over 5 every single week. So I'm in a lot of video meetings every single day. That depends on the role you're in. But I think since with this whole pandemic going on, with a lot of folks doing remote work where you're not running into people in the hallways and such, a lot of people set up meetings. So one of the things to be prepared for, if you work remotely, there's probably going to be a lot more meetings than what you're used to. And then the last thing is around productivity and distractions. You probably read all about this stuff. It's like, just want to make sure that you're going to be able to be productive when you're working remotely. A lot more distractions. I think some people, it's the opposite. They're working way more when they're working remotely. So I think it's harder to get that right balance in a remote environment. All right, let's talk about getting the interviews. I'm not going to read through all this. I just thought this was interesting. I think networking online is super important. I'm going to say that probably most of the people listening to this network online better than I do. But there are these groups that I belong to. These are just out of Facebook, but LinkedIn has some great ones as well. There's some good things on Reddit as well. But a couple of examples I just pulled from, this is a product management group here. And what I wanted to highlight was, it was really interesting to see how helpful people would be inside of these forums. So in this first one, it says, "Hi, I'm Michael, applying to a number of PM roles. This person had an APM background, associate product management background in the past, trying to get some advice on how to get move forward. And a number of folks after that just wrote, "Hey, you know what, reach out to me, DM me if you're interested. I can help. I can read your resume for you. I can coach you through this." There's a lot of just free help that's out there, which I think is fantastic. On the other side, here's a person who was trying to get back to the workforce after 5 years of caregiving. It's a person saying it's been a hell of a task. Haven't heard from anyone yet. It's trying to feel exhausted. Just getting tired of this. They got an MBA, they got some experience here, but they're not able to move anything forward. And a number of folks at HCA, your experience in caregiving could be a plus. PM me your resume if you're interested. Ping me with your background and experience. I run a venture studio and have 5+ companies looking for a PM. It's just a number of folks just responded saying, "Hey, there's a person who showed some vulnerability here. They said, here's the situation I'm in." And a lot of folks just reaching out to try to help. And I think it's fantastic. I think it's an opportunity. When I was first looking for a job, these kind of resources didn't exist. I think it's pretty awesome that there's these opportunities that are out there now. The other one I'm going to throw in here is, it's more than just your resume. If you have, and I think this may not transfer to all of the different fields, But my field, I'm lucky. I was able to, there's a lot of things I can kind of put out there online, whether they're Medium posts that you write or Medium articles that you write, whether you're posting things back into the different forums on social media. I wrote a blog to talk about my experiences, to talk about how I look at management, and being able to share this outside of just your resume. And it's kind of like designers have this all the time, right? Designers have their portfolios. If you can put your presence out there where a potential employer could learn more about you, can learn more about your philosophy, can know that here's my side project and working on barbecue butt, that you have that ambition and that interest and you're able to get out there and work on these other type of projects. That goes a long way for an employer when they're looking at your resume to see the other type of projects you're working on, to see what your point of views are in your industry, even if it's articles about your industry that you're in. Being able to get those things published, I think those are fantastic ways to be able to highlight and show your expertise, especially my first product management job that I got. This was kind of back when I was, before I started at eBay. I didn't know much about product management. I did a ton of research into it. And while I was researching, I started a blog keeping track of what I was learning during that process. And I shared that blog during that in my first interview. And that was one of the things I think helped me get that first role where I was breaking into a new field. Okay, applicant tracking is, if we had tips on here where I was rating these, I should have done this. I was going to do it and then I didn't. This is one I would put the 5-star on. Like, this is super important. And this changed the game for me when I was looking for a role just in this past few months. I went from getting, using this tip here, I went from getting almost 0 calls per week to getting multiple calls per week. And what applicant tracking software is, for those of you who don't know, is a lot of companies are having essentially a computer AI read through, or a filter read through your resume. And then nobody's actually reading your resume unless it gets past this initial filter. So it's using a piece of software that will scan your resume and compare it to what this particular software I was using here is called JobScan. There's a ton of them out there. Some are free. I think JobScan was like 20 bucks a month. You upload your resume, you upload your job description, and they essentially just give you a whole bunch of recommendations on keywords you should be adding to that resume. And what it does is it helps you refine your resume to match it to that job description. And I think 2 reasons why this helped a lot. Number 1, it helped get through that filtering software. But number 2, a lot of companies also have somebody who's oftentimes from HR filtering through their resumes by hand, just reading through them, and they're looking for those keywords themselves. So they have the job description. They're taking a look to see if you match that job description. And sometimes they don't have experience in the industry. So they're looking for those specific keywords. And if you have them on your resume, much higher chance that you're going to get that through and get into an interview with the hiring manager. So this is something I would say, if you're not getting callbacks when you're sending your resume out, absolutely start using one of these applicant tracking optimization software. This is one I'm going to throw out there just around something that worked for me. I would say organize for continuous improvement. I had a set of folders for different verticals or industries I was applying to. I'd keep my every variation of my resume, I'd keep there. And I think they kept getting better and better because I kept using the applicant tracking optimization software. I would use the latest version in there, and I was continually updating the latest version. So my resumes were getting better and better and more tied to that industry because they're picking up more and more keywords from job descriptions in that industry. I go to this middle column around, this is just application answers, cover letter snippets, interview answers. These are things I hate writing things over and over again. So if I was going to answer questions, sometimes you'll go through LinkedIn and you'll fill out the application and there'll be questions that they'll ask you and you want to start filling those out. I saved all of those in these documents. So when I saw a similar answer, I could just copy and paste straight from here back into the application software, and I'd be able to save a ton of time not having to retype everything up. I think this is just organization, and getting things organized is going to make your life way, way easier. I say start slow to go fast because it takes a while to just get all this built up. But once you have all this built up, you could start applying for jobs way faster. So it makes your job application process go way smoother in the future. This is something I actually touched on a bit at the beginning. Different sites will work better for different industries and job levels. Here's my recommendation here. Try a lot of different sites initially to see where jobs are getting posted from the industries that you're interested in. Different industries post into these different type of job sites. So one that's not listed here, if you're interested in startups that I love, is AngelList. So AngelList is another really good resource for startup careers. But you see really different jobs on Indeed versus LinkedIn, as an example, in my field. For me, as I was trying all those different jobs, like I said before, most of the things that I was interested in was popping up on LinkedIn. And I know for other folks, LinkedIn doesn't work at all. So this is one just to try, figure out which ones work so you can start focusing on the right areas or right sites to post on. I just threw this in here really quick. Watch out for scams. I'm going to tell you the reason I put this in here is because we hire a lot of tutors at PandaTree. And we hire a lot of remote positions at PandaTree as well. This was actually a message from someone at PandaTree. I'm questioning a job offer from your company. Someone reached out to this person using Facebook Messenger, saying they were from PandaTree and saying that they had a payroll job for them. And then they would say that they would have to write them a check or something for equipment or something to that effect. So these things are going on. A couple of things: if they ask you to pay for something, don't. If you're offered a job without even having any interview, it's probably a scam. If you're asked to give personal information like credit card or something, probably a scam. There's a lot of these out there now. And I know this because this was not the one that happened at PandaTree. These were happening over and over again where people were reaching out, to the point where a couple of people fell for these and were contacting us saying, hey, where's my printer that you're supposed to send me, or something like that. It's pretty bad. So watch out for scams. Let's go to preparing for the interview. Research the company, because there's so much information about companies now that are out there. When you get a phone, even when you're getting the phone screen, research the company. These are a couple of things that I was able to do just for Dispatch. I was able to watch videos about reviews from drivers. And I was able to see a lot of folks who didn't like Dispatch and see what the biggest complaints were. I was able to read about Dispatch's core values, which was fantastic, because as you're talking about, when you're putting what I'll talk about in a bit, your stories together, what you're going to talk about with the company, being able to align those to the company's core values is fantastic. So there's a ton of research you can do with these companies. What I oftentimes did was, when I was preparing for an interview with a company, because I was focused on product and product manager, and I would put together a little product strategy that I would be able to talk to you just based on the research I did, usually on YouTube. YouTube is a fantastic resource for the companies that I was looking at, just because so many people were talking about those companies. This is a great opportunity for, if you're let's say you're in the legal space, for example. I think being able to know if a company who's working with gig workers and they have California Prop 22 on whether or not somebody's classified as an employee or a contractor, being able to talk about that, because this company is facing problems there. So being able to go in and talk about some of those specifics when you're doing that type of research, and being up to date on the problems that they're probably facing right now, is going to give you a big leg up in those discussions. Also, research the interviewer. This one's kind of a little fine line with me. I don't want to go get stalkery or get overly research somebody in terms of seeing all their social media and everything. But I'm going to tell you something with my interviews with Dispatch. The founders had they were on this podcast. It was like an hour-long podcast where they were talking about, here's how they got to where they're at. Here's some of the issues that they're running into. Here's what their strategy is. I was able to just listen to this, and I was able to get a deep understanding of what Dispatch was about. I was able to get a deep understanding into the problems that Dispatch was running into or may run into in the future. And this was invaluable. This information this is one and the one before I was going to get the 5-star tips to. Like, these are must-dos. And you can't always find information about the person who's going to be interviewing you, but sometimes you could find information about the founders of the company. And sometimes you could find information about the head of the group that you're going to be in. Maybe it's the chief marketing officer doing a presentation at a conference. So being able to just get that information is extremely helpful. This is one, know your stories. This is one that we could spend a whole presentation on talking about how to develop your stories for your interviews. And when I'm interviewing folks, it surprises me sometimes when I ask a basic question, like, and it could be a question about, tell me about a time that you had a big impact on your company, or tell me about a time where you made a mistake. And it surprises me that they're in the interview, kind of thinking back, trying to figure out what that story is, when they should just know these. You should have, and I think it's these 6 stories. You're going to learn as you go through the process. Maybe there's something missing. Maybe there's something here that you're not using. But when you talk about why do you want this job? Why are you passionate about wanting to work in this industry or for this company? Like for me at Dispatch, I'm really interested in from product management. I love to work on really hard problems. And I like to work on what they're called multi-sided marketplace problems, where you have 2 sides of this marketplace. It could be a buyer and a seller. It could be a driver and a passenger. Or it could be a student and a teacher. Right? You got these 2 sides of the marketplace. And whenever you do something good on one side, it usually is bad for the other side. If I want something to get picked up faster at Uber, it's going to be penalties or things I'm doing to the driver to make it harder for the driver to work inside of that marketplace. I love working on those type of problems. And I can talk about those. I'm passionate about that. I could talk about that for hours with someone. So I could go in with these stories about why I'm passionate about it, what type of impact you've had. If you've worked in a business or a company or a nonprofit, or even things you've been doing in a club, what type of impact you have, this is really important. So it's important I'm sure you have a lot of these stories. And sometimes it's just figuring out how to reframe those stories so they're focusing on revenue. So they're focusing on a customer being happier, or decreasing costs, or optimizing a process. Like a lot of times what you need to do is just take the stories and your successes and frame them to show what is the impact that they've had on that organization. The other one is everybody nowadays is wanting to be customer focused. So being able to have that story about a time that you helped a customer, that you went out of the way and made a customer happy who was not happy before, a project which impacted a whole bunch of customers and made them happy. Showing that you're customer focused, really important, and having a good story around that, super important for the interviews. A time you made a mistake. Now this is a tricky one. You don't want to share the time you made a mistake that you shouldn't have made that mistake. There's certain type of mistakes I think are better to share, and I'm surprised sometimes at the kind of answers people give me about making a mistake, where it was just in some cases like negligence, and I don't think I would hire a person who made these certain type of mistakes that they're sharing with me. But the type of mistakes that I think are great to share are ones where you took a risk, and you took a risk. You learned something from it, and it turned out something that you do better in the future. An example from my life is at eBay. We were trying to increase the number of sellers selling iPhones on the platform. One of the things that we were thinking was, wow, wouldn't it be great if people just filled out a form, sent their iPhones into eBay, and eBay just sold it for them? Let's just make it super easy, because people didn't want to go through that whole selling process themselves. And we already had a return center so people just sent it to the return center and do that. A lot of that worked great. But the things that didn't work great was sellers hated the fact that we were competing against them and selling stuff on behalf of other sellers, kind of making other sellers on the platform at a disadvantage. Lesson learned, something sellers don't want eBay competing with them at all. Even if those people would have been selling their item on the site anyway, even if it doesn't impact their business, they didn't want that optics on the site. So it's something we learned for future projects and how we implemented those learnings. So take a risk. These are the best mistakes. You took a risk, you learned something, you got better at it in the future. Problem solving, and a lot of this is, I think this is probably obvious, but people just want to know how you approach your problem solving. So I think that piece is really important. Talk about the why you're doing that. Why is this problem a problem for the company? So why does the business care about it? That's important. Talk about how you went about solving it. And if you can talk about data, or talk about how you got feedback from the customers or something there, that part of the approach, I think even more valuable. Talk about the solution you came to, and then talk about the outcome. And anywhere you can, if you could talk about outcome in terms of specific numbers, increase customer satisfaction on these surveys by 20%, decrease time and people spending these lines by 15%. Anytime you could talk about specific numbers, more helpful. And then the last one, and this is really helpful if you're going into a management job, but just in general, how you helped others, how you helped other teams, how you developed underperformers, how you help people get better at what they were doing. Having a specific story there, I think is super, super important. If you have these 6 stories, you can mold these into whenever you get those questions about, tell me about a time when, usually you can morph these 6 stories into answering almost all of those. I can't tell you how many times I was just telling the same stories, interview from interview, over and over again. I don't even think it was 6, it was probably about 4 of them. So you get a lot of overlap here. But you just get these same stories, you just get to know them, and you just start telling them over and over again. And then this goes to take as many interviews as you can. Here's the thing, interviews, I know they're time consuming. They take time to prepare for, but they provide such great practice to help you get better. That's number one. I also cognizant of, let's not waste other people's time. And you shouldn't do it just for getting the practice. But a lot of times you could take these interviews and there's opportunities there that you weren't expecting. This actually happened to me during this last round of job searching. I was contacted about a role in which was going to focus on a lot of advertising and paid type of advertising on a site, which isn't my background. It's not something that I was good at. During the first round of the interview process, it was, hey, you're probably not a good fit for this role, but we have this other thing over here. And I actually went through an entire interview process for e-commerce, for this e-commerce platform job, which was a good fit, and kind of went to the final rounds of that and was thinking about that job with the dispatch job. And I wouldn't have even had that opportunity had I not taken that first interview that seemed like it was pretty unrelated to what I was doing. So I did a lot of interviews during this process. A lot of them probably I already knew beforehand they weren't going to go anywhere, but I got so much better at interviewing from this first set of interviews I did to the later set of interviews that I did, that I thought they were well worth it. Plus you get the opportunity to potentially get these other opportunities that might pop up as you go through them. So I would say, as you go through this process, take as many of these interviews as you can. Now let's talk about the interview itself. Make a great first video impression. There's some of those stats here on the left. I think all those are pretty obvious. You're going to see these all over. You can find those tips all over the internet, so I'm not going to spend time on that. First video impression, have a good camera is actually pretty important. The one thing, I don't know if I can do this quickly. Let me see. I'll start my other video here, which kind of shows, like, this is bad video, right? This is why I'm using my phone camera over here and not my laptop camera, especially when I'm backlit. I guess the other answer here is don't be backlit. This is not a good background to use for a video interview when you have a camera like this. So use a good camera. The other things that I see is, I think some of these are obvious. Good lighting, make sure you don't get interruptions, important. The last one I think here is fairly important. Have a phone ready in case there are connection issues. Usually you have the option to dial in as well. This just happened this past week when I was interviewing a candidate. Their connection kept on dropping. Their sound kept on cutting out, so they'd have to drop off and rejoin. At some point, eventually, they ended up dialing in. And that shouldn't impact my decision at all in terms of they're having technical difficulties. But I think subconsciously for some people, if you're going to have these constant technical difficulties as you're going through an interview, that can affect somebody. That can affect how you're seen. First impressions make a big difference. Be aware of that as you're getting everything set up and you're having those interviews. I think this is super important. Now I'm going to go into this next section is just around questions asked. When I'm going through this interview process, the one thing that I've noticed is people don't spend very much time. And I'd say over half of the candidates that I'm interviewing don't take advantage of this time to ask questions at the end very well at all. I think this is a super important part of the interview process. And I'm surprised that people don't spend a lot of time here. I have a few different questions that I think are really important to ask that are actually going to help you get to that next step in the interview. So here's the first one: show interest in the role. And also at the same time, I just combined a couple of these because I think the questions are similar. Learn if this is a good fit for you. The Q&A time is the perfect time to start diving into, is this the company you want to be at? Can you tell me about the team and the people I'd be working with, the manager's management style? Tell me about the culture, like all those basic questions. I'm surprised people don't ask me some of these questions. And when they don't, you kind of get the impression, like, do they care about working here? Or it was interesting. One of the candidates that we actually ended up hiring was one of the questions I had to ask her was, are you interested in this position? Because I couldn't tell. We got super well qualified for the position. I was actually very excited about this person joining. But then when we started getting to the end, I wasn't sure if the person was actually interested in the role. And I actually had to ask the person, are you actually interested in this role? I can answer any other questions you have about it. And they said they were. At that point, they kind of lit up and said, I'm absolutely interested in it. But I wasn't able to read that during this Q&A time and at the end. So if you're interested in the position, make it clear you're interested in the position, because if I didn't ask that, and what I don't want to do is go through the whole process of getting another round of interviews set up, which is going to take a number of people's time. And I don't want to do that for someone who I'm thinking may not even likely take the role. So I think it's important that if you're interested, show that you're interested in that role. Okay, here's another one. Highlight questions that highlight the skills that the interviewer did not cover, especially when they're skills that you know are important for the role. This is something that I did a lot while I was going through the interview process. If the interviewer didn't talk about something that I felt like, I want to share this information because I know it's important to this particular role, this is the opportunity for me to bring it up. And here's some examples. You might be a designer, and maybe user experience research is something you do a lot of and you're great at it. And you got a lot of experience there. And you know this company is going to benefit from that. If it didn't come up in the interview, you might want to ask, how important is user research in this role? And they say, that's super important for us. You could then go into saying, hey, well, I have that experience. I've done this and this in the past. So it's giving you an opportunity for you to bring up subjects that just weren't brought up during the interview that you think are important. What type of software are you using? CRM software, or maybe you're a QuickBooks expert going into doing some bookkeeping for a company. Hey, what type of software are you using for your bookkeeping? Maybe you've done compliance for a GDPR or SOC 2 or something, and you have that in your background. You know the company is going to be doing that. You might want to talk about that and bring that subject up so you can talk about your experience there. All right, this next one is, this is one I would give the 5-star one to. I think this is a super important question. These questions are super important to ask. It's questions to prepare you for the next round of interviews. So these are almost like little cheats you could do. This is like a little way to get more information about your future interviews that you normally would not have. So if you go in and ask, what are the biggest problems a person in this role is expected to solve? What does success look like 1 year from now? So if you hired me into this role, and you saw this as being so glad that you hired me, 1 year from now, what does that look like? What are the best qualities that people that are successful in this role have? And what are some of the biggest challenges? The great thing about these questions is when you get these answers, this is giving you preparation for your future interviews, because you can start talking about how you're going to get here. You could, not only that, you could start talking about some of this right during this particular interview. So this is giving you opportunities to further highlight ways that you can take your current skill set, your current knowledge, your current experience, and say, hey, I got that. This is why I'm going to do this well. And it's also setting you up to have all of that knowledge for your future interviews. So this one, you have to do this. This is super important stuff to do. Next one. Okay, this one, 5-star question too. Like, this is one I'm surprised everybody just does not ask this question. I think it's so insightful, and it's helped me. I asked this in every single interview I did, and it was super insightful a whole bunch of times. Man, not every time, but a lot of the times it's really insightful because people are pretty honest. And do you have any concerns about me in this role? Now, what that does a lot of times is the person will sometimes say, you know what, I have concerns that you don't have enough experience with user research, and you can now address it. Like, you could address their concerns that they were going to take back to the team. You can address them right now. And so it's giving you a chance to address some of the issues that it might be something that they're just assuming based on some answer that you gave in the past, and which might not even be true. So this is a question you have to ask. I think it's super important. All right, so let's go to the next slide here. Take notes. This for me, I think was great. First, ask the interviewer it's okay. Nobody said it's not okay to take notes while you're going through this process, but it's good to let the interviewer know that you're taking notes, because when you're down here doing stuff, they're going to want to know why you're not paying attention sometimes, maybe. So just say, you know, it's okay. It's okay. I take some notes. I think it shows that you're engaged. I think people actually want to hear that. I love when, like, I'm fine when people say they want to take notes. Good. So which questions tripped you up? This is a good one to take notes on. Any answers that didn't go well, things to remember for the next rounds. Just start noting those so you don't forget about them. Maybe you're the type that actually remembers these things. I'm not. So these are the kind of questions, these are the kind of notes I took during the interviews. And this goes back to this whole concept of continuous improvement. And taking these notes helped me get better and helped me get better in my interviews going forward. All right, how are we on time? We good on time?
We have a couple more minutes until we want to go into Q&A, see if anyone has questions for you.
All right, I'm going to go through these fast. I'm just going to go to advanced tips now. Those are all the basic tips. Now I'm going to go to the advanced stuff. And this is maybe everyone doesn't get here, but I think this is good stuff too. Really quick, perfect timing for multiple offers. I think being able to time yourself to get multiple offers is getting multiple offers at the end of a process is going to give you leverage when you're getting to negotiate. It also gives you a safety net if one of them doesn't work out, and being able to look at options are always good. When you're feeling close to crunch time, like when somebody that seems like they're going to make an offer, let people know. Let the other jobs, so a couple things, let everybody else know that you're interviewing with, that you got a job offer that's coming. The other thing is, if an interview process is going well and you think you're going to get an offer here, by the end of it, I would start just sending out more resumes to try to get multiple offers. I would start spending more time on your job search than you normally would to try to line up multiple offers at the end. When I came down to the last set of offers that I was working through before I took dispatch, I think I had 3 with 1 in the waiting. So, and I was getting very few before that. So this whole time of, once you tell others that you got an offer on the table or going to get one coming up, people start moving fast, and it's a good motivator. There's this whole fear of missing out, and they don't want to miss out on you as a candidate. So this drives a lot. Visualize the future with your interview. I think we could go into a whole discussion around how you want to have an interview. I love interviews where we're not only talking about the experience of a candidate, but we're also talking about how this candidate fits into my current positions that I have. What you want to do is, as much as you can, so many interviews are focused only on the past. And now I, as like the interviewer, have to think about, all right, so that past kind of maps to this stuff that they're going to be doing. So they could probably be doing that going forward. It's better to be talking about how you're going to be helping that company with their existing problems. Being able to, and I know we're almost out of time, and I think this next one is kind of related, so I'm going to just jump to it, but being able to anticipate their problems. This is one way to start talking about the future. And so if, for me, when I was talking with Dispatch and they're talking about multi-sided marketplaces, and one of the things that a company like Dispatch needs to do is they need to increase customer satisfaction. They need to make sure that things are delivered on time and all the things are getting picked up. And I know when a company starts focusing on that, it's going to get harder for the driver and to start breaking down trust. So we start talking about how do you build trust with your drivers inside of that environment where you're going to make so many changes. I think in accounting is a good example. Some of the things that we ran into in Panditry was when you give out credits to people, how do you log those in the books? If they don't expire, it sits on as a liability. If you're in accounting and you're going into a company that has this concept of credits, like being able to just really understand how all these credits would impact their books going forward. Start talking about their problems. You have experience here. How you're going to fix your current problems or their problems they're going to face in the future based on their plans. This would get you to the next level. This is how you get a leg up on a lot of the competition, because a lot of the other candidates that they're talking to, they're not talking about, if I go back, they're not talking about the future. They're talking only about their past. And they're not talking about anticipating these problems that I'm going to face in the future. They're talking about their past. So this is a whole nother set of conversations I think to have, but I think it's a good mindset to have when you're in these conversations, to try to bring your conversations out of the past and into the present and into the future, to figure out what are you going to be able to actually do for this company and how are you going to make an impact there. And that's it. I'm pretty close to time, maybe a minute over. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Rich, for your presentation. I learned so much. I actually wanted to add a little comment in. I really like that last question. Do you have any concerns? I think it's a really important question, and it often helps interviewers kind of learn and reflect throughout their process. So at this time, would you mind unsharing your screen so we can start off the Q&A session? I would love to ask the first question. Rich, I really think that when you brought up past interviews, that you would be a great interviewer. But as we know, some interviewers do have certain styles and preferences. So one of the questions that I did have were, how much do time zones impact consideration of a prospective hire, especially since remote positions are slowly transitioning to hybrid roles?
Yeah, so and you mean time zones with the actual job that you're taking or with the interview itself?
So time zones as in the location of the job, where they would be located.
I think that's an important one to, this is a good one around if you're a morning person or not, especially with us being out here in Hawaii, because if you're not a morning person, working with companies on the mainland, East Coast is going to probably be super difficult. And the East Coast right now is for me, it's tough and I get up early. Company I'm working for now mostly works on Central Time. So my first meetings are 5 o'clock, but I'm done by 12 or 1 o'clock. So it's actually nice that I can go to Velvet Touch in the afternoons and pick up the kids and do things with the kids in the afternoons, not just play pool. A lot of things with the family. And it frees up that time to be able to do those type of things. But you got to get up early. And I got to go to bed early to do that. So time zones is a consideration. West Coast isn't that bad. I mean, they're 2 or 3 hours difference. But as soon as you start going to East Coast, it's pretty tough. And so if you don't mind 5 o'clock in the morning meetings, then Central Time is probably okay. 4 o'clock in the morning meetings, then you're probably okay with the East Coast. That's pretty early though.
Hi, Rich. I really liked your tip about using technology such as the applicant tracking optimization to your advantage. And my question is, have you ever encountered a question you didn't want to answer or by law you aren't required to answer, such as what is your marital status or do you have the ability to get to work? And how did you navigate this situation?
You know what? I didn't run into that issue as I was going through the job. I think there's a difference in the industries that I was applying to are fairly modern or progressive industries, and a lot of the companies I was applying to in California. And I know just from my previous jobs that there is a pretty strong, it's highlighted pretty strongly around what we can and can't do as we go through that hiring process. So fortunately for me, I didn't have to go through that process. And actually, I'm not even sure I would know the answer to your question very well in terms of how I would handle that one. So it's a good question. I'm sorry, I'm not sure how I would handle that one. But I didn't encounter that through my job search.
That's good, because I know some of the questions, right, are like illegal or you're not required to answer them by law. So I guess that's a good thing that wasn't a situation you encountered.
I think the thing I would add there, though, that I think is important, you should know your rights and what the law is in terms of what you can and shouldn't necessarily, you don't need to answer because they're just not allowed to ask. And the reason why those laws are there is to make sure that they're not discriminating based on sex or gender or anything in terms of things that should not matter for the job. So I think it's important to know what your rights are and what you can answer or what you should answer as you go through those forms. The applicant tracking system software doesn't really address that because it's mostly for resumes, not necessarily when you go through these applications. But you're right, there's a lot of sites or a lot of jobs when you apply to, you're filling out an application. You're essentially, I think the resume is even less important, and you're taking, again, back to those snippets of things that you wrote, they have questions that you're just answering. And if you encounter those questions, if you encounter those questions, I'm not sure what you should do. It's a good question. If anybody else here, I mean, I don't purport to be the expert on all these things. If anyone else has suggestions, I'd be happy to hear those as well.
Hey, Rich, I had a question on interviewing, and I've been in a couple different situations where you have like a few members, a few people from the company interviewing you. Yeah. And, you know, one time, one of the guys was a comedian. So every other question he asked, he always threw in a joke, and then it's so hard to stop laughing and go back to where you were. And another time, it was actually a former colleague. They brought him in to kind of co-interview because I'd be working alongside him. And, you know, I was just trying to be honest with what I knew. And he was trying to build me up, saying, oh, I'm sure you could figure that out easily. I'm sure you could do that easily. And I'm just wondering, you know, what the different personality types and the problems you've had with the group interviewing and how you offset that, I guess.
Yeah, so a couple of tips just on group interviewing in general. Group interviewing is a little more difficult to navigate because when we're having these one-on-one conversations, you kind of are falling into a little cadence and style. I think just naturally, that whole mirroring concept, you're just falling in with that one person. It's definitely more difficult when you're talking to 2, 3, or 4 people on the video chat at the same time. And I think it's actually more difficult when we're doing it over video chats versus when you're doing it in person. It's so much easier to read body language. It's easier to read expressions and such. I just find it easier in person for group interviews than for these type of video chats. I think the thing that's important, one thing that I noticed, and I was trying to be very cognizant of when I was going through these video group interviews, was to try to do a couple things to do this, but it's trying to engage everyone inside of the room. And so when one person asks a question, really easy to do when you're in a in-person setting, looking at everybody as you're answering the question, you're not talking to the one person. It's harder to do when you're on video. So one of the things that I found helpful was, and this is, I think, where notes come in, and when you're thinking about the interview, being able to refer back to something that somebody else had said, even when you're asking a question, and pull other people's comments and other people's perspectives into your answers, I think is really helpful. Being able to help engage people who are not asking a lot of questions. So if you know there's somebody from, let's say, engineering, who not asking any questions during this time period, I think being able to, when you're asking questions or when you're answering questions, being able to ask something to the person who's not participating as much or trying to get their perspective, to bring that person's perspective in, was helpful for me. I think a lot of it is, for me, it was trying to make sure that you're still engaging everybody on the video call, and not just addressing kind of one person at a time. That's what was most helpful for me in those discussions. I think video group calls are just a little bit trickier to navigate than the one-on-ones. And I'll throw out there, I had a lot fewer video group calls. I think the group interviews I did, I probably did about 3 of them during that whole process. So there weren't a lot. So it wasn't super common. Any other questions?
So I had a question for you, Rich.
Yep.
You were mentioning like different social media platforms would be better for like certain job opportunities. Which platform do you think would be better for marketing?
So part of me wants to, I'm going to throw out 2 things. I wasn't looking for marketing jobs. So take this with a real big grain of salt. Like, I'm not an expert on this one at all, but any kind of job where part of this depends on the type of companies that you're looking at. when we were hiring so I was working on hiring some marketing folks in the previous role, all of those jobs we focused on 2 sites, which was Indeed and LinkedIn. Like those are the only 2 places that we were posting marketing roles. The other place to look, if you're interested in startups, is back to AngelList. I think AngelList is fantastic for marketing. If you're looking to break into marketing and you're looking for a startup job, AngelList is incredible as a resource for that. The one nice thing about marketing is one of those roles that I think it's going to depend more on not necessarily marketing, but actually the industry you're looking to go into. So you're going to get a lot of tech companies, a lot of the business companies, all those are going to be on LinkedIn. The older, bigger companies, those are all going to be on Indeed. So it's like you just get a shift in the type of companies that are advertising for marketing jobs on those different sites, and then you'll get all the startups on AngelList.
Thank you.
Okay, are there any last questions? All fantastic questions, by the way. If not, Rich, I would like to do this activity with you. It's called a rapid fire question round. So I'll be asking you 5 to 7 quick questions where you would try to choose one option or the other as fast as you can. And I just really hope that it helps everybody in this workshop today kind of end things on a light note so we get to know you a bit more. So
Okay.
are you ready?
Go ahead.
Okay, so the first one is Star Wars or Star Trek?
No, Star Wars. My wife, Star Trek. Actually, I could talk about that one for a while, but let's go ahead and keep on going.
Okay, poke or plate lunch?
What's that?
Poke or plate lunch?
Oh, plate lunch. It's and then I will also go a little deeper and say that meat chun is probably the best plate lunch that there is. Okay.
Okay, third one is San Jose or Hawaii?
Oh, Hawaii. It's an obvious one.
This fourth one might cause some tension, but Ruth's Chris or home grilling on your smokestack?
No, so I'm pretty spoiled. Ruth Chris doesn't come close to making steaks the way I make steaks. It's not even close.
I had to ask.
Yeah, I don't want to brag, but it's not even close.
DC or Marvel?
Oh, that one's trickier. I don't know. It was DC before, but then when I got Disney Plus, I ended up watching all the Marvel stuff, which I like. I like maybe I'm leaning more towards Marvel now. I think that shifted over the past couple of years.
Yeah, and then our last question is not a either or, but just a straight question. Favorite movie franchise?
No, I'm not. So not movie. Let's see. Game of Thrones are the best series franchise, along with the best sci-fi on television. Again, my wife's going to disagree vehemently, but it's Battlestar Galactica, the new series, not the old. It's the best sci-fi ever on TV.
So you're similar to Dwight from The Office. Battlestar Galactica.
I guess so. Yeah, I don't know if I take that as a compliment, but it's similar to Dwight.
Similar to Dwight. All right. So thank you for your chair gripping answers. Again, thank you so much, everyone, for your fantastic questions, and Rich, again, for sharing your knowledge and spending time with us today. I wanted to thank you personally for introducing concepts, around optimization, such as applicant tracking, which really helps get through the filtering software and pique the interest of hiring managers. And I also really thought it was helpful that you presented a wide breadth of topics. Usually through presentations, it's either resume workshops or interview workshops, but you really went the distance and did resume to pre-interview practices to the actual interview and knowing your story. So again, thank you so much. And with that.